no man can become a serviceable servant solely by obedience to written edicts, and though the principles elucidated...
La, said I but one young lady, as you can plainly see.
When we soon espy
yoo-hoo!
a newly arrived officer of the regiment,
Yoo-hoo!
of most gentlemanlike appearance, he was introduced to us
By an officer already of our acquaintance as...
Mr. Wickham.
His appearance was greatly in his favor.
He had all the best parts of beauty.
A fine countenance,
A good figure.
and a very pleasing address.
How do you do? Well, this is fortunate indeed. Around the officers' table, the Bennets are highly spoken of, and all of it approbation. Miss Catherine and Miss Lydia, I presume? Wrong way around.
Quite topsy-turvy.
My fondest apologies. I hope I'm correct in addressing you as Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
Yes, quite correct.
I solicit your further acquaintance, Miss Bennet.
Our society, sir, is not extensive. I venture we will meet again.
La, we were talking oh so very agreeably when the sound of horses drew our notice.
And Mr. Bingley and Darcy came riding by.
Mr. Wickham barely touched his hat, which Mr. Darcy hardly deigned to return. What could be the meaning of it?
Before walking on, we naturally enjoined Mr. Wickham to pay us a visit.
Indeed, it would be my great pleasure. Us poor souls in the army are greatly lacking in feminine instruction. Miss Bennet.
Mr. Wickham.
La, but our sister has made a conquest.
Lydia.
I am very fortunate in my patronage. The nonpareil Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who has condescended to take me in hand. What beauty! What elevated style and affability! She is, of course, the proprietress of Rosings in a very, 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 very extensive property. But, a very extensive property. And as I told Lady Catherine myself one day, even though she is not able to live in town because, unfortunately, her daughter is not well, this has deprived the British court of its brightest ornament. Absolutely splendid.
Mr. Wickham has arrived. Mr. George Wickham, Papa.
Pleased.
Delighted.
Parson Collins, Mr. Wickham.
Always a pleasure to meet a gentleman of the cloth. I had a near miss myself once.
As Mr. Collins once again held forth.
As I remarked to Lady Catherine on more than one occasion, her charming daughter seemed born to be a duchess, and that no rank, no matter how elevated, can give her consequence, but rather be adorned by her. But to be brief...
Mr. Wickham suggested that I show him around the grounds.
Please excuse the temerity with which I accepted your sister's kind invitation with an almost unbecoming alacrity.
It is a great kindness to seek us out. The regiment, I hope, is not unhappily quartered here?
I cannot speak for the regiment, but I might say that I am personally improved by acquaintance with your family.
A courtesy very prettily put.
And sincerely meant.
I could not help noticing, sir, a certain coolness of regard passing between yourself and Mr. Darcy.
You have a keen eye, Miss Bennet.
And a curious one, sir.
Pray, tell me how far it is from Merrifield to Netherton.
3 miles, perhaps?
And how long has Darcy been staying there?
About a month. He is a man of very large property in Derbyshire, I understand.
Indeed, his property is a noble one. I've been acquainted with his family for some time. Are you very well acquainted with him?
I have spent 4 days in the same house with him, and I think him very disagreeable.
I believe your opinion of him would in general astonish.
Really? He is not at all liked in Hertfordshire.
May I express surprise? The world is perhaps blinded by his fortune and consequence, and sees him only as he chooses to be seen.
I should take him, even on my slight acquaintance, to be an ill-tempered man.
I fear I'm very well acquainted with him. The late Mr. Darcy, his father, was excessively attached to me. His son and I grew up in the same parish. We shared the same amusements. My father was his father's estate manager. The elder Mr. Darcy knew the church ought to be my profession and promised me the family parish should it become available. Or, if not, a voluntary promise of providing for me. Both were countermanded by the young Mr. Darcy after his father's death.
On what grounds?
Had the late Mr. Darcy liked me less, his son might have borne with me better. But his father's uncommon attachment to me irritated him. He had not the sort of temper to bear the competition in which we stood. In short, his behavior towards me had been scandalous. But I do not trust myself on the matter. I can hardly be fair to him now.
I had not thought Mr. Darcy so bad as this.
I do believe that all of his actions can be traced back to his considerable pride.
But can such abominable pride as his have ever done him good?
I must own him to be liberal, generous, assist his tenants and relieve the poor. Family pride and filial pride have done this. His father's love for me has pricked that pride and made him my enemy.
I am astonished at his intimacy with Mr. Bingley. Do you know him?
Not at all.
He is a sweet-tempered, amiable, charming man. He cannot know what Mr. Darcy is.
Mr. Darcy can please where he chooses. He does not want abilities.
My judgment would be that he deserves to be publicly disgraced.
Someday I'm sure he will be, but not by me. Miss Bennet, might I say that the troubling aspect of our subject has not made you one whit less delightful?
I must suppose, sir, that the relationship you have described will not permit your attendance at the coming ball at Netherfield?
I would feel a general embarrassment for all involved. But make no mistake, Miss Bennet, I keenly feel the loss.
Well, whatever he said was well said. And whatever he did was done gracefully.
But, dear sister, I am all astonishment and concern. I know not how to believe Mr. Darcy could be so unworthy of Mr. Bingley's regard.
I can much more easily believe Mr. Bingley's being imposed on than that Mr. Wickham should invent such a history of himself.
But it is so distressing. One knows not what to think.
I beg your pardon. One knows exactly what to think.
I only know with certainty that poor Mr. Bingley should have much to suffer if Wickham's charge ever became public.
Poor Mr. Bingley.
I speak only as an observer.
Back at home, Mr. Bingley and his sister came to give their personal invitation for the long-expected ball at Netherfield, which was fixed for the following Tuesday. While Mr. Collins...
I am by no means of the opinion, I assure you, that a ball of this kind, given by a young man of good character, can have any evil tendency. And I am so far from objecting to dancing myself, that I take this opportunity, Miss Elizabeth, of soliciting the first two dancers with you especially.
And it first struck me that I had been selected from among my sisters as worthy of being the mistress of Hunsford Parsonage.
I perceive that Elizabeth still longed to see Mr. Wickham among those assembled.
Seeking the conquest of all that remained unsubdued in his heart.
I might title them dances of mortification.
Miss Bennet.
Do you want something, sir?
Yes, might I hope for your hand for the next?
Well, I hardly think that...
Dearest Eliza, do not be a simpleton and allow your feelings for Wickham to make you appear undesirable in the eyes of a man of 10 times his consequence.
Well then.
The music is well played, do you not think? It is your turn to say something now, Mr. Darcy. I talked about the dance, and you ought to make some kind of remark on the size of the room, or the number of couples.
I quite assure you that whatever you wish me to say will be said.
Very well, that reply will do for the present. Now we may be silent.
Do you talk by the rule then when you're dancing?
I have always, Mr. Darcy, seen a great similarity in the turn of our minds. We are each of an unsocial, taciturn disposition, unwilling to speak unless we expect to say something that will amaze the whole room, and be handed down to posterity with all the eclat of a proverb.
That is no very striking resemblance to your own character, I am sure. How very near it may be to mine, I cannot pretend to say.
I have recently had the pleasure of forming a new acquaintance with a childhood friend of yours, a Mr. Wickham.
Mr. Wickham is blessed with such happy manners as may ensure his making friends. Whether he is equally capable of retaining them is less certain.
He has been so unlucky as to lose your friendship, and in a manner which he is likely to suffer from all his life.
What think you of books, Miss Bennet?
I cannot talk of books in a ballroom. My head is full of something else. I remember hearing you say, Mr. Darcy, that you hardly ever forgave, that your resentment once created was unappeasable. You are very cautious, I suppose, as to its being created?
I am.
And never allow yourself to be blinded by prejudice?
May I ask to what these questions tend?
Merely to the illustration of your character. I am trying to make it out.
And what is your success?
I do not get on at all. I hear such different accounts of you as to puzzle me exceedingly.
I could readily believe that reports may vary greatly with regard to me, and I could wish, Miss Bennet, that you would not sketch my character at present, for there is reason to fear that the performance will reflect no credit on either.
Ah, Mr. Darcy, you are, if I am not mistaken, the nephew of my eminent patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who secured for me the living at Hunsford Parsonage. Thus may I observe that I consider the clerical office as equal in point of dignity to the highest rank in the kingdom, provided the proper humility of behaviour is at the same time maintained.
You have neglected your name, sir.
Have I?
You have.
Mr. Collins, sir.
Delighted.
Excellent, most excellent. I have no reason, I assure you, to be dissatisfied with my reception. He answered me with the utmost civility, and upon the whole I am much pleased with him.
Though he neglected his name.
Did he?
What's this dull town to me, Robin Adair? What was I wish to see? What wish to hear? Where all the
Well, Miss Eliza, I hear you are quite delighted with George Wickham. Oh yes, your sister has been talking with me. Did you know he is the son of the late Mr. Darcy's steward?
I believe he so asserted.
Let me recommend you, however, as a friend, not to give implicit confidence in all his assertion. As for Mr. Darcy using him ill, it is perfectly false, for on the contrary, he has always been remarkably kind to him.
Well,
George Wickham has treated treated Mr. Darcy in a most infamous manner. I do not know the particulars, but his coming into the country at all is a most incident thing. Considering his descent, one could not expect much better.
His guilt and his descent appear by your account to be one and the same. For I have heard you accuse him of nothing worse than of being the son of Mr. Darcy's steward. And of that I can assure you, he informed me himself.
I beg your pardon. Please excuse my interference. It was kindly meant.
Insolent God!
By heavens, you do step it wonderfully.
Under your instructions, sir.
Well, that at least promises the felicity which a marriage of true affection can bestow.
Ah, Miss Bingley. I am sure I need not enumerate the advantages of such a match.
Mamma?
The advantages of being but 3 miles apart. Oh, and knowing that Jane was so admired.
Sadly, I'm carried away, and we must go.
Oh, Miss Elizabeth, it is a great shame we footed it but once.
When at last the guests and officers quitted the house, Mamma spoke all the way home of preparations, new carriages, wedding clothes, and seeing Jane settled at Netherfield within 3 months. Oh, and Mr. Collins' marriage to Elizabeth as well.
May I hope, madam, for your interest in the matter of your penultimate eldest, Elizabeth, for I solicit the honour of a private audience with her in the course of this morning.
What? Oh, yes. Of course, indeed. Indeed, a private audience. May I get your drift, sir? My dear Mr. Collins, I am sure that Lizzie will be very happy. And I am sure that Lizzie will have no reason to object. Oh, private audience, come, Kitty.
Dear madam, do not go.
Do not go.
Mr. Collins must excuse me. He can have nothing to say to me that anybody need not hear. I am going away myself.
Nonsense, Lizzie. I desire that you stay. And here, Mr. Collins, Lizzie, I must insist. If you staying and hearing, oh, Kitty. Stay.
Your modesty adds only to your other perfections, but my intention's a bit too marked to be mistaken. But before being run away with by my feelings, I shall enumerate my reasons for marriage. First, to set the example of matrimony in my parish.
Of course.
Secondly, by the particular advice and recommendation of my patroness, Lady de Bourgh, let her be an active and useful sort of person, able to make a small income go a long way. Her very words. You may remark, fair cousin, that I do not reckon the notice of Lady Catherine the least of my advantages. Your wit and vivacity, I think, must be acceptable to her, especially when tempered by the silence and respect which her rank invariably excites. Fourth, as I am to inherit this estate upon the death of your honoured father, I feel bound to choose a wife among his daughters, so that the loss to them might be as little as possible. And now, nothing remains for me but to assure you, in the most animated language, of the violence of my affection. To fortune, I am indifferent, and as to dowry, I am well aware of your father's finances. But you may assure yourself that no ungracious remark shall ever pass my lips, as long as we are married.
No.
No?
I am very sensible of the honour of your proposals, but it is impossible for me to do otherwise than decline them.
Oh. It is usual with young ladies to at first reject the addresses of the man they secretly wish to accept.
I do assure you, sir, I am not one of those young ladies. You could not make me happy, and my
Naturally, you cannot be serious in your rejection of me. Good sense and financial necessity forbid it. It is your wish to increase my love by suspense, according to the usual practice of elegant females.
I am not, Mr. Collins, an elegant female intending to plague you. I am a rational creature, speaking the truth from her heart. I will not have you. Can I speak plainer?
You are uniformly charming.
Mr. Collins, allow me to be the first to congratulate you.
She has begun delightfully, with a refusal.
Refusal?
And a bashful modesty and the genuine delicacy of her character.
Mr. Bennet, you are wanted downstairs immediately. Oh, headstrong, insolent girl. She does not know it is in her own interest.
Headstrong?
Oh, but I will make her know of it.
Headstrong? Insolent? Dear me. If so, it were better not to force her acceptance, because if liable to such defects of temper, she could not contribute much to my felicity.
Mr. Bennet, you must have Lizzie marry Mr. Collins, for she swears that she will not have him.
I have not the pleasure of understanding you.
Pray, excuse me.
Mr. Collins! Oh, and now Mr. Collins says he will not have Lizzie. Lizzie!
And what would you have me do on the occasion?
Have her marry him.
Come here, my child. Is it true that Mr. Collins has made you an offer of marriage?
It is.
And this offer of marriage you have refused?
I have, sir.
An unhappy alternative is before you, Lizzie. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins. And I will never see you again if you do.
I tell you what, Miss Lizzie, continue on in this manner, and you will never get a husband. And then, I am sure that I do not know who will take care of you once your father is dead!
Please excuse me,
Oh, Mr. Collins.
but I wish to withdraw my pretensions to your daughter's favour. I have come to realize that her high spirits may not find their perfect expression in the somewhat circumscribed life of the parsonage. I have meant well, but if my manner has been in any way reprehensible, I here beg leave to apologize. I am resigned, but I hope improved. Resignation is never so perfect as when the blessing denied begins to lose its value in our estimation.
I will simply say, Lizzie, that I will never speak to you again. You will find me as good as my word. For I take no pleasure in speaking to undutiful children.
The discussion of Mr. Collins' offer was now nearly at an end, but rather than decamp in disarray,
He made it known that he was always to have gone on Saturday, and to Saturday he still meant to stay.
and
The assiduous attentions paid to Lizzie were transferred,
to Charlotte Lucas, who was visiting.
whose civility in listening to him was a seasonable relief to us all.
Jane, this has come from Netherfield.
From Netherfield?
Caroline Bingley says the whole party are leaving for town, without any intention of coming back again.
I do not pretend to regret anything I shall leave in Hertfordshire, except for your society, my dearest friend. It is evident by this that Mr. Bingley returns no more this winter.
It is only evident that Miss Bingley does not mean he should.
I will read you the passage which particularly hurts me. I will have no reserves from you. Mr. Darcy is impatient to see his younger sister, and to confess the truth, we are scarcely less eager to meet her again. Georgiana has no equal for beauty, elegance, and accomplishments, and I dare entertain the hope of her being hereafter my sister.
Foolishness! She is a child!
Is it not clear enough? Does it not expressly declare that Caroline Bingley neither expects nor wishes me to be her sister, and that she is perfectly convinced of her brother's indifference to me? Can there be any other opinion on the subject?
Yes, there can, for mine is totally different. Will you hear it?
Most willingly.
It is this. Miss Bingley sees that her brother is in love with you, and wants him to marry Georgiana Darcy. I also suspect that Mr. Bingley's regard was further suppressed by his friend, Mr. Darcy's interference. He watched you most narrowly as you danced.
You must not criticize, Lizzie. Perhaps I've imagined Mr. Bingley's regard. Women fancy admiration means more than it does.
And men take care that they should. His sister has influenced him as well, Jane, in conjunction with his friend.
Surely she only wishes his happiness.
She may wish many things besides his happiness, such as an increase in wealth, consequence, and great connections.
No, Lizzie. I think no ill of him or his sister. Let me take it in the best light, in the light in which it may be understood. I have at least the comfort that it has not been more than an error of fancy on my side, and that it has done no harm to anyone but myself.
Truly, you are too good. You wish to think all the world respectable. The more I see of the world, the more I am dissatisfied with it, and every day confirms my belief of the inconsistency of all human characters. I have come to distrust the appearance of either merit or sense.
You must not hinder your happiness on my behalf.
So, Lizzie, your sister is crossed in love, I find. I congratulate her. Next to being married, a young lady does like to be crossed in love a little now and then. You will hardly bear to be long outdone by her, I think. Here are officers in Meryton enough to disappoint all the young ladies in the land. Let Wickham be your man. He's a fine fellow and would jilt you creditably.
Thank you, sir, but a less agreeable man would satisfy me. We must not all expect Jane's good fortune.
Amazement. Within a very week, and in as short a time as Mr. Collins' long speeches would allow, all was settled between him and Charlotte Lucas, by way of
domestic arrangement.
And Lizzie feels she accepted him solely from
the pure and disinterested desire of an establishment.
And as Mamma said,
care not how the establishment was gained.
Charlotte's marriage is unaccountable. In every view, unaccountable.
You must not give way to feelings such as these, Lizzie. They will ruin your happiness.
Engaged to Mr. Collins? My dear Charlotte, impossible.
Why should you be so surprised, dear Eliza? Do you think it impossible that Mr. Collins should be able to procure any woman's good opinion because he was not so happy as to succeed with you?
Indeed not. But 2 offers of marriage in 3 days.
Dearest Eliza, I think when you've had time to consider the matter, you will be happy for me. I'm not a romantic, you know. I never was. You must come and visit us at the parsonage as soon as ever you can.
I am telling you that Mr. Collins has been taken in. Worse!
No.
Worse. I am sure that Lizzie is behind all the mischief. Oh, you're in such a deplorable state. Now, because of the intel, Charlotte Lucas will become mistress of this house. I will have to make way for her and live to see her take my place in it.
Let us hope for better things. Let us flatter ourselves that I may be the survivor.
Mr. Wickham's society was of material service, and his betrayal by Mr. Darcy was of general knowledge. We all agreed that
Mr. Darcy was the worst of men. On the following Monday, the Gardiners, my mother's brother and his wife, arrived. He is a sensible, gentlemanlike man, and Mrs. Gardiner, as always, enlivened the premises by distributing presents, describing the newest fashions, and the giving of sage advice.
A young man such as you describe, Mr. Bingley, so easily falls in love with a pretty girl for a few weeks, and just as easily forgets her. Now, as to Mr. Wickham, whom you mention far too often, I would have you be on your guard.
Oh, he shall not be in love with me if I can prevent it.
Do not involve yourself in an affection which, for lack of fortune, should be very imprudent.
At present, I am not in love with Mr. Wickham, but I count him as the most agreeable man I ever saw.
Unwise.
But how can I be wiser than so many of my fellow creatures if I am tempted? Or how am I even to know that it would be wisdom to resist? All that I can promise you, therefore, is not to be in a hurry.
I say no more. Oh, I shall take Jane with me to London, poor girl, for a change of scenery may be of service. It had better happened to you, Elizabeth. You would have laughed over it so much sooner. I hear you are to visit the Collinses in their newly married state, and you must come to visit me.
To take me to Hunsford Parsonage, the improvement of spending a night in London made the plan perfect as plan could be. Jane, look now, I see London is agreeable to you.
Lizzie, sit with me.
With every pleasure. You look so well.
I confess myself to have been entirely deceived in Miss Bingley's regard for me. She has barely visited me here in London, and when she did come, it was very evident she took no pleasure in it. She seemed to have come to convince me of her brother's interest in Miss Darcy.
All gentlemen I hold in my lowest repute. It is said that Mr. Wickham is now the admirer of a certain Miss King, whose most remarkable charm is the acquisition through family mortality of £10,000. Oh, and it is most indelicate that he should be directing his attention toward her so soon after this event. Elizabeth, you're pale. Are you ill?
A man in distressed circumstances has not time for the elegant decorums which others might observe. If she does not object to it, why should we?
Her not objecting to it does not justify him.
I have a very poor opinion of young men who live in Derbyshire, and their intimate friends who live in Hertfordshire are not much better. I am sick of them all. Thank heaven I am going tomorrow to the Collinses' parsonage, where I shall find a man with not one agreeable quality, who has neither manner nor sense to recommend him. Perhaps stupid men are the only ones worth knowing after all.
Oh, bravo! You must accompany Mr. Gardiner and myself this summer on our tour of pleasure, where we shall avoid the sex altogether and regard landscape
My dear, dear aunt! Oh, what delight! What felicity! Oh, you give me fresh life and vigour. Adieu to disappointment and spleen. What are men to rocks and mountains? Every object in my next day's journey was new and interesting. The chaise comfortable, the weather delightful, and all conspired for the pleasure of the traveller. At length, the parsonage was discernible, and Mr. Collins and Charlotte appeared at the gate.
Dearest Eliza, you are welcome and you are welcome again. Come in immediately. You